Hi, everybody. Welcome back to my Zero Carb Life. I'm Kelly Hogan, and I am joined by a lady that I have admired for such a long time. I was just telling her I have spent a very large amount of time watching Dr. Georgia Ede. Dr. Ede, I have admired you, listened to your talks, laughed at your jokes. You're hysterical and brilliant, and I am so excited to be talking to you today.
Well, thank you. You can thank my mother for my sense of humor, if that's helpful.
Yes. All right, Dr. Ede, I don't have any medical degrees, but there's one thing I know for sure after 11 years of speaking to people about an all meat diet, and that is that there are people out there who have serious concerns. And I don't think they're being flip, and I don't think they're just trying to degrade us for the way that we eat. Serious concerns about eating an all meat diet, especially in the realm of cancer.
Yeah.
So I know for sure that people are worried, but what I don't understand is why? Why did people first start getting so worried about meat and cancer?
It's been one of those myths that's been in the culture for a long time and has been promoted and sort of cultivated by some very influential institutions and very influential individuals with a lot of power and large platforms. And most people, even lots of doctors and scientists, don't have the time, unless it's their field. They don't have the time to scrutinize the science and figure out that there really isn't any there. It's a lot of work to get to the bottom of these arguments. So, when somebody who has a lot of education and a lot of prestige tells you something, then you're inclined to believe it. So if I bring my car to a mechanic, I'm not going to second guess everything the mechanic tells me because I don't have time to learn how to be a mechanic. So we place our faith and our trust in these institutions and in these individuals. And the unfortunately, that this information is simply false, and you cannot find information that pins the tail on that donkey, so to speak,
About eating meat, especially when it comes to cancer risks.
I haven't found anything.
Okay.
The documents which are the most influential, which I've scrutinized very carefully and talked about and written about, the WHO report on meat and cancer, for example, or the Eat Lancet report that came out in January of 2019, trying to blame meat for all kinds of problems, environmental problems, health problems, cancer, chronic disease, metabolic disease. When you look at those documents, there isn't any information there which ties meat in any convincing way to any human health problem. And it wouldn't make sense that meat would be tied to any human health problem. I'm not going to be able to make an ironclad convincing argument, on a podcast, because there's so much information to look at and to take apart and to sort of blow those myths up. But if people want to read more, there's a post on my website, Diagnosis Diet website, called Who Says Meat Causes Cancer? And that's about the WHO report. It goes into lots of detail about every experiment,
Okay.
all 6 of them. Only
Yes.
six experimental studies were cited in the WHO report on meat and cancer. 3 were on rats, 3 were on people. It's unbelievable. And all of those studies were seriously flawed. The Eat Lancet report on advising us all to virtually eliminate meat from our diets around the world. There is no science in that report that supports that recommendation. And I've taken that apart for people, both on Psychology Today, plant-based, I think it's called Eat Lancet's Plant-Based Planet, and in various presentations about the Lancet report. So if people are really curious about the details and really want to know the nitty-gritty, they can look there. But I'm happy to focus on whatever you think the questions are that people are most interested in, the things that they're most afraid of when it comes to meat and cancer.
Well, when I watched your presentation on Who Says Meat Causes Cancer, what stood out to me was the ridiculousness of some of the experiments. Like you said, only 3 were on people, and the ones that involved rats, they were not feeding them anything close to what we would consider even a carnivore diet. They were feeding them 60% meat after in some of these experiments after they had already injected all of the rats with carcinogens. And then the chow itself was filled with extra heme, which is a part of what meat contains, but they were doing it in very unreasonable proportions to where it was nothing like what a carnivore would eat at all. And also, they had been injected with carcinogens, which I get was to speed up this process. But in the end, even their report says none of the rats actually developed cancer. Also, they're rats. So the whole thing was really mind-blowing. But what people, I think, look at typically is that headline. The World Health Organization says meat causes cancer.
That's right. And this is really the problem, is they have a lot of pull, they have a lot of clout, and if somebody looks at the information and questions it, and they don't have that same huge megaphone and all of that prestige and all of that, the weight of the institution behind them and the title World Health Organization, who's the average person going to believe? I understand. I understand how compelling those reports can be. But when you really look at what they based their arguments on, you scratch the surface and you really cannot find any reliable information tying meat to cancer. And as you said, there were these 6 experimental studies. They looked at, just so people understand that sort of the context here. So they said that they looked at, more than 800 studies to create this report. And it's true, they did look at more than 800 studies, but the vast majority of those studies, more than 800 of them, were what are called epidemiological studies. And nutrition epidemiology is not a method that you can use to show cause and effect relationships between foods and diseases. They're basically a guess based on questionnaires. But let's say you're a believer in nutrition epidemiology and you think, okay, well, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to count that information. If you're going to count it, what they did was they took these more than 800 studies and then they dismissed the vast majority of them as irrelevant. And then they boiled it down to, I think, something like, 50 or 60 studies. And then it turned out that of those few dozen epidemiological studies, they were split right down the middle. Half of them said meat was fine. The other half said maybe there's a problem. So the epidemiological studies are a wash. And the purpose of even the best epidemiological study is to generate a hypothesis, a guess, like a working idea that you then you use that idea to do experiments, to clinically test your idea. Let's say, I think red meat causes cancer. The epidemiology supports me in that. So now I'm going to design an experiment to test it. So epidemiology gives you, when it's done very well, which nutrition epidemiology never is, when it's done very well, it gives you an idea about which direction to put your research money into. So that was the epidemiology, right down the middle.
Okay.
And there were six experimental studies. 3 were on rats. Like you said, they were all either pre-injected with a carcinogenic chemical, or they were genetically bred to develop cancer more rapidly. And they were fed these very strange diets with very strange ingredients. And then they still didn't develop cancer.
No.
So, and then the human experiments were very small, very poorly controlled, meaning they didn't just change one thing, they changed lots of different things. They didn't even tell you all the things they changed. And then they looked for these, biomarkers. None of the humans developed cancer either. So, and none of those studies were reproduced. And so no respectable scientist would look at those 3 human studies and make any conclusions from them. So if people knew, if even scientists and doctors knew that that tiny little bit of information, of clinical trial information, if they knew that that's what that report was basically resting on, they would dismiss it out of hand. But they don't know that. They just think, it's the World Health Organization. They've looked at more than 800 studies.
Right.
Nobody has time. Nobody has time to really dig deeper. So I don't want people to worry about meat and cancer. I mean, the fact that I've been eating off and on either a carnivore diet or a mostly meat diet for years now, the reason I looked into this was because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing damage to my health by eating this way, even though the diet was extremely beneficial to my personal health. I don't know whether in the long term it's dangerous. So I wanted to understand what it was based on. And so when I discovered that there really wasn't anything there, I was able to relax. And as you know, evolutionarily, it wouldn't make any sense for a whole food, a natural food that most creatures on Earth eat every day for millennia. Why would that cause cancer? It doesn't make any sense.
It does not make any sense. I know that you and I have both experienced such great relief of symptoms and such physical benefits and mental benefits from eating this way that it just kills me to think that there are people who would say, well, sure, I feel better, but I don't want to die of cancer. And I have had people reach out and say that. So sad.
And it's a hard, when something has been repeated so often, you see it in all the, you see it in newspapers, you see it online, you see it on TV. It's hard to fight back those myths. But that is what they are. And, most nutrition studies are not reliable. And so what I do think is reliable is common sense, anthropology, what we understand about biology, physiology, biochemistry, and your own personal experience. The presence of meat in the human diet, I'm convinced that the human diet requires, the human physiology requires, human physical and mental health require the presence of some animal food in the diet. It also requires lots of other things not to be in the diet. But the presence of meat is absolutely clear from the evolutionary history and from the biochemistry. Just like any other diet, the carnivore diet has many definitions. There isn't just one carnivore diet. So there are people who consider eggs carnivore. There are people who consider dairy carnivore. Those are very common causes of food sensitivities in sensitive individuals.
If you were to say probably the safest way to start carnivore, where somebody really has a lot of issues and they're already doing real loose carnivore, I think dairy, I should always say pasteurized dairy tends to be the most troublesome for people, and then sometimes egg white. And I typically, even as a non-nutritionist, just from watching people, I say, well, I think one of the safest ways to just try to eliminate everything and try to feel good, like you got to get to a spot where you feel good before you can start tweaking, is to just go get 1 to 2 fresh steaks and eat them 1 to 2 times per day and see how that does for you. Like a ribeye, go get 1 to 2 ribeyes a day. Is that a good place to start?
That's a great question, because I know that a lot of people think of, an all beef diet, like eating beef and water, eating ribeyes, that sort of thing, is that's the ultimate elimination diet and sort of the cleanest carnivore diet. But I haven't found that to be true in my practice or for myself personally, because I personally don't tolerate beef particularly well, or pork for that matter. And so I'm paying attention to that possibility in my clients as well. And there are some people who simply don't do well with beef. And partly because, at least in the United States, it is virtually impossible to buy beef that hasn't been aged for at least 3 weeks. And so if you have a sensitivity to aged foods, you will not do well with beef. It is actually one of the animal foods which is the most difficult to find fresh. So for some people, the all beef diet, and it's a great place to start, but if you're not doing well in that, the first thing I'm going to recommend is try a different animal. Try duck or try salmon or try lamb or try something else that is nutritious and has a nice high fat content, but is not beef and is and find it fresh. So I don't think there's even one good answer to what's the best way to start carnivore. Although I know that a lot of people really thrive on an all beef diet. That's certainly not the case for me.
That is so interesting. So you primarily eat duck, chicken?
Yeah, poultry of all kinds. Duck in particular is one of my favorites because it is kind of a red meat and it's more nutritious and has a much higher fat content than chicken. So duck is a staple in our house, and also I eat quite a bit of salmon. I eat lamb, other types of seafood, bison. Some I tend to do a little bit better with bison than with beef. It took me a long time to figure out that pork was also an issue, so I avoid pork. Yeah, and everybody has to sort of fine
Yeah.
tune until they feel well. And sometimes it takes some time to figure that out, trial and error.
Okay, so it sounds like you and I both very much agree that meat is good. Meat is not going to cause cancer. Meat is ancestrally appropriate.
Yes.
Meat, you may have to work to find which meat is perfect for you. So we're
Yes.
pro meat. We're pro meat. Now, that's a very important thing I wanted to establish is that I'm not a doctor, but you are, and you've read a lot, and we're both very pro meat. Otis is even pro meat, right, buddy? Very pro meat. Okay. But
Absolutely.
going forward, there are some people who are not very pro meat these days, and some of them have a lot of power,
Mhm.
money, influence. Just in the past couple of weeks, the meat loving community has been quite in an uproar over some articles that have come out about Bill Gates saying that he would like to see many of the more affluent countries eating only what I call fake meat, plant-based, non-meat products. What in the world? I think you and I have seen enough people changed. You work with a lot of clients helping to work on mental health, and I've seen so many people typically just wanting to lose weight and reduce inflammation. That's mostly what where I'm working with folks. What do you think this is about?
I think it's really complicated. I think that it goes back a long way, at least to the 19th century, and these beliefs that meat is not good for people, and I think it's partly wishful thinking. I could think it would be what a wonderful world it would be if life didn't involve eating other creatures. Wouldn't that be nice? And it would be nice, but it's
Yeah.
not true. It's just not true. And life requires life,
Yes.
and this is nobody's fault. It's simply a fact of nature, and so I think we'd like to believe that it is better for us not to that other animals wouldn't have to suffer and die to nourish us. If other animals had a conscience the way we do, because so many animals eat other animals, as we know, they don't think twice about it, but they don't have a conscience and they don't have this ability to really reflect on these things. And I think that it's a blessing and a curse that human beings have that capacity, because we sometimes and that we're so intelligent that we like to problem solve, and we think, well, how could we work our way around this requirement for animal foods? Well, maybe we can supplement our way out of it. Maybe we can engineer our way around it. But these I haven't seen any approaches yet that spare us the requirement for animal food. Supplementation is a very poor substitute, and we're simply not designed to obtain nutrients in isolation in concentrated amounts outside the context of a whole food. We're simply not. And so for optimal health, I mean, you can get by, but most people will not thrive on a diet which is made entirely of plant foods, particularly if it's not carefully supplemented. And the need for supplementation is unfortunately downplayed among many in the plant-based medicine community. I think that's changing a little bit. That I think there is more responsibility, there's more transparency about the requirement for significant supplementation in plant-based diets. But the other problem with plant-based diets is not just what they lack, but it's what they must contain in order to nourish the human body. In order to get all the protein that you need, you have to eat foods which are pretty hard on the body. You know, foods contain a lot of anti-nutrients that contain lectins and lots of natural chemical weapons, defensive compounds, which can be irritating to the human body, to say the least. So it's there are two problems with an all plant diet, and one is that you're not going to get everything you need unless you plan extremely carefully, and you're going to get a lot of things that you really don't want, that can damage your health over time and significantly. So that messaging that has become stronger and stronger and stronger about the so-called plant-based diet is really dangerous to human health, and particularly dangerous to women who are planning families.
Yes.
Because babies and children require special fats in the diet and high amounts of animal-based nutrients in the diet in order for the brain to develop properly. So I think it's a very unfortunate message based on wishful thinking and also profit motives. I mean, there are profit motives everywhere. I don't have any problem with people making a living and, with their ideas, but, plant-based burgers, somebody's making money off of those. Pea proteins, making money off of that.
Yeah. So I recently asked on Instagram, why do you think, I asked them the same question I'm asking you. Why do you think there's this push from especially the rich and famous, it seems, to do this? And most people said, always follow the money. Most people seem to think it was just about profit, money, 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 and a reliance on them for food, as in you can't just go to your farmer next door or go hunting. You can't be self-reliant. They think, I had a lot of people tell me they thought it was a desire to take away our self-reliance so that we are then dependent upon these companies and dependent upon the government to feed us and do everything for us. And then there were plenty of responses where it was like, oh, they're pure evil. They're wanting to reduce the population. They're trying to, population control. So the responses were quite varied.
It's a very charged topic. And, I like to kind of steer clear of the conspiracy theories around it. I think that I don't really know what the truth is in the hearts of people who are promoting this way of eating. And I think there are probably many, many different types of motives depending on the person. But I think I think that it's a very, very popular, very appealing idea that appeals to our sense of who doesn't want a healthy planet, who doesn't want happy, healthy animals, who doesn't want a healthy body. We all want those things. And if the message coming from these influential, prestigious institutions and individuals is that eating plants and not eating animals is the best way to solve all three of these problems that we're all worried about, that's going to be a very popular idea. Yeah. And especially among young people right now, it's a very, very popular idea. And so people who are influencers in popular culture, they're going to want to be part of that. I mean, it feels, I think, to a lot of people like the right thing to recommend and the right thing to do. So I really like, in most cases, to give people the benefit of the doubt and say, I think that this is what is going on in most people's minds. I can't say for sure. I just think it's unfortunate because, especially when you think about people in developing countries, where they're not going to have access necessarily for socioeconomic reasons to high quality supplements. They're not going to have access to plant-based burgers. They're living a subsistence lifestyle where, maybe they may be able to raise chickens for eggs. Maybe they'll have a cow in the yard for milk if they're lucky. But mostly they're subsisting on, beans and grains and corn and starch and very low protein diets, which are nutritionally insufficient. I don't think that, impossible burgers and supplements are the answer for the world. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
No, and the people who are already eating diets quite based on those out of necessity. In fact, I just saw a statistic recently, wish I could remember where, that said that by far most vegetarians and vegans on the earth are that way only by necessity. They simply can't get meat. And it's not that they're thriving more than anyone else. We've already got these people groups to look at. They're not healthier.
No, in fact, there's a lot of very strong, science and research that tells us the opposite. That people in developing countries where there's very poor access to sufficient animal foods, nutrient deficiencies are rampant. Iodine deficiency, iron deficiency.
Yeah.
These kinds of deficiencies really impair brain development and stunt growth. So you see children who don't reach their full height. You see children with lifelong intellectual disabilities. Blindness, vitamin A deficiency is rampant in third world countries. And there have been many, many studies that have shown that if you simply increase the animal protein in those diets, even by a small amount, even by adding an egg, a single egg per day to a child's diet, can improve their nutritional status. I don't think that most people in the world have the luxury of eating a well-supplemented whole foods plant-based diet.
Do you worry about a lack of meat in the future here in America?
Well, I hope not. I don't know. I certainly hope not. I mean, I do think that, still the vast majority of people, at least in the United States, are still eating animal foods.
Yes.
For whatever reason, that's still happening. But these high plant and all plant diets are very popular right now, particularly again among young women. Women are 3 times more likely, I believe. I think something like 3/4 of people who identify as vegan in the United States are female.
Oh.
And it appeals to, compassionate nature, people of compassionate nature. And I completely understand that. Again, I think it mostly comes from a very good place. It's just misinformed. It's misinformed. And that's why I think, it's really important for people to get the other information out there so people can make an informed choice. And there's a tremendous amount of science behind the requirement for animal foods in the human diet. And there is zero. This is the thing. Most people don't understand this. There is no evidence that removing animal foods from the human diet results in any health benefits of any kind, because that experiment has never been done. And most people don't realize that what's happening is a grand biological experiment. If you recommend that the entire planet stops eating animal foods, you're doing a grand experiment that's never been done. It's never been done in even the tiniest study, because every study that claims that so-called plant-based diets are healthier than diets including animal foods doesn't just remove the animal foods. It removes all the junk as well. And it often manipulates lots of other variables too. It'll change exercise, it'll change smoking, it'll change alcohol, it'll change fat content, stress reduction. It'll make all these changes, and they'll compare those people who are now doing all these incredibly healthy things and not eating most animal foods, and not eating refined carbohydrates, and not eating vegetable oils, and not eating added chemicals. They're taking all those people, comparing them to people who are eating a junky diet that happens to have meat in it.
Yes.
This is not the way you test that idea. If you want to test your idea, if you really want to show me that a diet without animal foods is healthier, you need to compare apples to apples. You need to take 2 diets that are exactly the same, except one doesn't have any animal foods in it. And that's never, ever been done. So if you believe in that idea, those of you out there who promote plant-based diets, if you believe in that idea, show me that is true. That's the experiment I want to see, and no one's done it.
I want to see it too, but I'm going to be in the meat group. Not even for like a week. I can't even think about it. I call meat group. Somebody asked, when it comes to mental health, which I know is really your specialty, have you found that pasteurized, just standard grocery store dairy, they wanted to know, does it tend to have a negative effect on people, you think, mental health wise?
Well, thanks for that question, because I know that this is not a very popular stance, but I'm convinced dairy does not belong in the human diet beyond weaning. if it were true that we needed milk beyond weaning, we'd be the only mammal for whom that was true. And not
Oh,
just milk, but the
yeah.
milk of different species.
Right.
It's just
Right.
ludicrous. So what milk is it's a species specific growth formula designed to turn a baby mammal into a larger mammal. And then the mammal is supposed to graduate to solid food. It's supposed to go and hunt and gather for itself, whatever that mammal is, whether it's a cow or a deer or whatever it is. It doesn't make any sense that we would require dairy beyond weaning because no other mammal requires dairy beyond weaning. We shouldn't be in growth mode for our entire lives. It's a growth formula and a very powerful one at that. So even if it's never been treated with hormones, it naturally contains elements that turn on the growth system in the mammal that is consuming it. And this is why you see, for example, people who can't lose weight or who gain weight when they eat dairy products, when they include dairy products in the diet, particularly women, or people who can't control their cravings or who feel addicted to cheese or dairy products or yogurt. It can be very addictive for some people.
Yes.
So it really doesn't belong. I know. And if I did well with dairy, I mean, I feel in a certain way lucky that I don't do well with dairy because I do find it very, very addictive.
Yes.
But I cannot tell you how many people have sensitivities to dairy that have nothing to do with lactose intolerance. It's an intolerance to the proteins in dairy, to the casein in dairy, even if it's European casein in some cases, but the casein in dairy, which can cause inflammation, skin problems, digestive problems, chronic pain, inflammation, so many allergies, sensitivity, etc. But the other thing is that whey protein, which is the other protein in dairy, a lot of people have whey powder and whey smoothies and things like that. Whey protein raises insulin levels just as much as refined carbohydrates do. It doesn't raise blood sugar, it raises insulin. So good luck losing weight or getting your cravings and appetite under control if you're consuming too much dairy. And it's the first thing, and it's one of the top 8 food allergy and sensitivity culprits in the world, dairy products. So I strongly advocate that people remove dairy from their diets if they can, especially if they're not doing well in any way. It's always the first thing I'll recommend.
It's the first thing I tell people in regards to weight. I don't work a lot with people as far as mental concerns, but when it comes to weight, I'll ask first thing, are you eating or drinking? Because a lot of times it's in their coffee, right?
Yeah.
And I know how I am. It'll start with I'll put a tablespoon, and then 6 months from now, I think I'll put a little more. It's just increases and increases. I'm currently on day 6 with no caffeine and no dairy.
Congratulations.
Ooh, thank you very much. But I'm with you. I know I feel better without it. That said, do you include, this may seem like a silly question, I don't know, do you include butter when you say dairy?
I do include butter, but
Okay.
I will tell you, and I'm sure you know this, that some people seem to tolerate butter better than other dairy products, or ghee better than other dairy products, but it still can be a culprit for a lot of people.
Okay. I definitely don't find myself as addicted feeling with butter. I think partly because it doesn't taste like cheese to me. I like it, but I don't like it. I can put butter down, but cheese, oh my gosh, once I go there, it can be very quickly, it just gets out of hand. So yeah, I tend to classify butter. Only in the past year or so did I start to think of it as a little bit separate from most dairy, but you're saying that some people can't handle any of it.
Yes, unfortunately, myself included. So
Okay.
it really is, when I recommend that people do a dairy experiment, I recommend they take it out for 30 days, everything dairy related for 30 days, and keep note of how they're feeling from day to day compared to how they were before.
Okay, good. And for helping people with more mental type struggles, depression, anxiety, anything with the brain, do you tend to recommend higher fat carnivore?
When we're using a carnivore diet and we're not getting the mental health benefits they were looking for, the first thing I would look at is whether they're in ketosis and the depth of ketosis and what the construction of their diet was in terms of how much fat was in the diet and what kinds of foods they were eating. So I've had people who simply remove the dairy and they feel better. I've had people remove the eggs and they feel better. I've had people change the protein fat ratio, they feel better, or get their ketones into a little higher range. Sometimes people can be in a carnivore diet and their ketones are just too low for mental health benefits. They might be 0.5 when they might benefit in some cases by their ketones being more in the sort of 1 to 2.5 range. Everyone's a little bit different. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I've heard some people say that a higher fat carnivore tended to help them feel, in general, just a greater sense of happiness. And I didn't know if you had found that to be the case. I sometimes feel that myself. If I feel just a little glum, that sometimes just getting an extra fatty steak can help cheer me up a bit. A steak and sunshine didn't hurt many people, I don't think.
Yeah, all these individual differences, and particularly when you're talking about diets for mental health, there are a lot of nuances, and people who are taking medication, people who are having specific psychiatric symptoms. There's a lot to know. There's a lot to know before you dive into a low carb diet. So, particularly if you're taking medications or have a more serious condition. So that's one of the reasons that I do consults for people and write about these issues, and also why in the past year I developed a clinician training program specifically about ketogenic and other diets for mental health conditions, to teach other clinicians how to use these diets in a therapeutic sense specifically for psychiatric conditions, because there's just a lot to know, that and I want people to have more. I want more people to have access to these treatments. There are so few psychiatrists working in the nutrition space. There's just a handful of us who understand how to use ketogenic diets and other special diets. And so I want there to be lots more of us. And so that's my way of trying to bridge that gap, is by sharing with other clinicians what I've learned. And we're still learning. We're still learning every day. But I would like to, encourage your viewers, if they haven't already tried dietary changes, to think about, not just their body, but also their brain. And the brain has very special dietary requirements, and that are really best met by animal foods.
If people want to work with you, are you taking on new clients? Can they contact you?
I have a wait list right now, and people can
Okay.
go onto the website and learn about the consult service. I do consults for individuals. I do consults for fellow clinicians, who are, working on a tough case, and then the training program information is there on the website as well for clinicians who want to learn how to do this. But right now I have a wait list, but you can sign up for the wait list on my website, which is Diagnosis Diet.
Okay. And some of the clinicians that you have helped to train, do you have a place where people can find those people?
I'm actually in the process of creating a directory, not just of clinicians who have taken my program, completed the program, but also any clinician working in the mental health space who offers ketogenic diets as part of their treatment options. So I do want that to be a place where people can go to try to find help.
Okay, good. I'm glad that resource will be out there. Well, I hope what people take away from this is a little bit of peace, knowing that there are people like you who are deeply studying and looking and learning, studying with actual people day in and day out, and then looking at research and nutritional studies. And I've watched you enough. I feel like I really do know you. I do trust you. And I feel like you would come out and say if you saw something concerning, or you would tell people a change. I don't feel that with everybody, but I really do feel like I've gotten a sense of your heart by watching you so much. I hope that doesn't sound too cheesy, but it's true. And I do feel like I think you would really say, like, look, there are some concerns, and hearing you say, no, I personally feel great about eating meat, and I truly believe that it is best for all humans to include animal products in their diet. I hope that will help people to relax and let go of this myth that has just been repeated and repeated and repeated, and just to feel good about the foods that taste the best to them, that make them feel their best, that show that they are thriving in every way, their skin, their hair, their sleep. So many people will discount all of this that they're seeing on their body because of something they saw on a headline. So once again, I'm going to say the words, trust your body. Because if it's making you feel that good, it can't be that bad.
And I absolutely agree with that. And I think that, we can actually overthink these things. And I think that our own bodies will give us the best feedback, regardless of what any of the studies say.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on to talk to me. I definitely feel better, and I hope other people do too. And thank you for all of your speeches and your work. If anyone wants to just feel amazing and have some laughs too, they can just go on YouTube and search for Dr. Georgia E. That's all I've done. And I just sit and listen, and you're fantastic. So I hope you'll come back and talk to me sometime.
I really appreciate the invitation, Kelly. It's been really, really nice connecting with you. And thank you for all of the good work you do.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care.